The next part of the process is to unwrap the model and get it ready for texturing. But before we do that, I'm going to make a few quick changes just to make sure that everything looks nice and things go smoothly. So I'm going to press tab to get into edit mode. And one of the first changes I want to make is actually down here. We actually have, at least on my model, two vertices here. If we press Z for wireframe with this one selected, and then we press B for box select and drag it around that same vertex, you can see now we have two vertices selected. So to get rid of that, we're going to press Alt M and choose at last, and that gets rid of that. You now have one vertex. I'd also like to get rid of this vertex here. It doesn't really serve a purpose at this point. So I'm going to select it, hold Shift, select this one, Alt M, and choose at last to get rid of that. And then over here we have some extra vertices we can get rid of as well. We have these three here, and it will change the shape a little, but I think we can get rid of some of these. So I'm going to select this, hold Shift, select this one, and then select this one last. Choose Alt M and choose at last. That'll get rid of two vertices there. And I'd also like to get rid of the two of the ones that are behind, so I'm going to press Z for wireframe, select the one that's behind and on the left, hold Shift, select the next one, and then select this last one, Alt M, and choose at last. I'm going to leave these three here because they further define the shape of this curve, and it's a lot more noticeable than the vertices that were behind it, as well as the vertices that were over here. So because this has more impact on the shape of the car, and I'd like to keep it this way, I'm not going to remove those at this time. So the next thing I'd like to do is actually back in the back of the car, we have our license plate. And there wasn't much care taken when I made this license plate, so I'd like to make it a little more realistic, perhaps not entirely realistic, but something that will actually look like it actually fits with the car, rather than something that was just stuck to the back of it, which is basically what I did, because I wasn't really intending to keep this, but I think I'm actually going to keep it just as an example to show you how to handle license plates in cases where you might want them. So I think it's a bit big at this point. So I have one vertex selected, and we can actually just select the side ones here and drag it in a little, and select the bottom ones. Just be careful, make sure you get the ones that are connected to the license plate and not something else that's back here, and you can drag it up and adjust the shape. I'm basically trying to make it fit within this shape here, and you can adjust the size as much as you want until you're happy with it. And to fix my view a little, I'm going to press period on the number pad just to zoom in more on the back rather than what my view is at. So for this license plate, usually you don't want it to be mirrored. In other words, if I write a letter S over here, you don't want it to appear over here as well. And if it's mirrored when we do the UV unwrapping, that's exactly what would happen, is you would have an S here and a backwards S over here. So we basically don't want this to have a mirror modifier. And for this license plate, to fix that, since I have one of these selected, I'm going to go to select and choose linked. And then I'm going to press P to separate this part of the mesh and choose selection. So now this is completely a different object in our scene. So I'm going to press tab now to get out of edit mode, select our license plate, and now what we're going to do is we're going to use the shrink wrap modifier to basically stick this to the part of the car that we want it to be up next against. So we're going to go to add modifier and choose shrink wrap, and then down here for the target we want to choose the cube. So just select this little icon and choose the cube. So you'll notice there's some distortion, which we don't want. And that's because of the settings down here. So instead of nearest surface point, which I believe it's on right now, we want to do project. And you'll see it still doesn't look the way we want it to. In fact, nothing has changed right now, and you may be wondering why that is. If I go down here, further down, once all this disappears, it's because of this direction attribute. And right now we have it only able to move in the positive direction, which would be this way. But as soon as we enable the negative direction, it will be able to move this way, which is what it would need to do to project onto the car. So if we select and turn on the negative direction, it instantly snaps to the car just as we would expect it to. And at this point, if you still think it's too tall or too short or not wide enough, you can still press tab, go into edit mode, make your adjustments, and then go back to object mode by pressing tab, and it will still snap nicely even though you've made those changes. So go ahead and make any changes you want now, and then once you're happy, we're going to start applying these modifiers. We are actually going to apply the mirror modifier because we don't want it to be mirrored, as I explained before, because that will mess up any writing that we put on this license plate. So we're going to apply the mirror modifier first, and then we are going to apply the shrink wrap modifier. Now if we go to edit mode, it's nicely snug up against the car, just as we want it. Now typically license plates will have some sort of depth. They're not going to be perfectly flat surface like this is. So I'm going to select both faces. I'm in edit mode, by the way. You can just press tab to switch between edit mode and object mode. And once you have these faces selected, just press E to extrude, right click to cancel, and then drag it out a little on the y-axis. You can give it as much depth as you'd like to have. It's up to you. And if I press tab and take a look at it, this is what we have. It doesn't look too bad. But if you'd like to, you can go back to edit mode by pressing tab. And with these two front faces selected, press Ctrl B, and that will give us an edge bevel. And let's see what happens if I press B maybe. No, nothing's going to happen. Okay, so we're just going to have to fix the center once we're done with this. But you can give it a small bevel if you would like to. And since I didn't extrude mine very far out, it doesn't really seem to make too much of a noticeable difference, but it's an option you have. I'm just going to press Ctrl Z to undo it. But if you do make that bevel, make sure you get rid of this center part, or you can go to Edge Select and just deselect this middle edge and then Control B, and that'll give you basically what you want. That's the better way to do it, is to make sure this edge is deselected, and then you'll have something like this. But if you don't want that, just press Control Z a couple times. That will get rid of it, and you'll be back to this, which doesn't look too much different, so it's up to you what you want to do, I suppose. But I guess I'll leave it like this. So with those changes made, we can start unwrapping the car. And whenever you're doing an unwrap of a car, or at least a low poly car like this, a good thing to try to do is to isolate the side of the car and use that as one UV island, and isolate the top of the car, use that as another UV island. Do the same for the front. You would have the front isolated, and then the back. For this particular model, we're also going to have to unwrap things like this this part up here, and any parts that are not directly connected to the car, like the mirrors we'll have to do. We'll also have to do this side scoop here, and the tires, of course, will have to be done, as well as the wiper blade. So to get started, I have this selected. I'm going to instead select the car, and we're going to go into edit mode by pressing tab and start making some selections here. So we're going to start with the side of the car. Just hold Alt, right click on an edge right here, and that'll get you quite a bit of the car. And then just keep holding Alt and Shift and selecting to try to keep going down the car. But this is probably not the best edge to follow along, because it doesn't actually continue to the front. It stops here and then kind of curves over, and it's a little strange. So instead of doing this one, I'm going to move over to this next edge. I'm going to hold Alt and not Shift this time, just hold Alt and right click. See how that goes back here. I think it continue. Okay. Yeah, we can probably use this one. So just keep holding Alt and Shift and select that part as well, just so you can follow along. And then do the same in the front. Alt Shift, select this, so we have this. And we're going to start working our way through the car, trying to only get the parts of the side that we want to be together on the UV island. And you don't always have to hold Alt, you can just hold Shift and select normally to select one edge at a time if you would like to. Like in this case, I'm just going to hold Shift and click on this edge, but I actually probably want this other edge right here. Well, maybe not, because I'm just trying to do the outside of the car at this point. It's not going to make like too much of a difference, I don't think, but you just want to keep your edges continuous so that the whole thing is one piece basically, and it's isolated from the rest of the car. And you'll see what I mean if I make a mistake, how some pieces won't be isolated. So now we want to connect this part to basically the beginning. just keep selecting edges until you have a full connection. And then we're going to go over to shading and UVs and click mark seam. So if we've done this correctly, that should all be isolated as one piece. And one way to check is to go to face select, select a face that should be inside of these red lines, and press L. Since we only got the side of the car selected, we know we did it correctly because this entire part is fully closed off from the rest of the car. So this part has been done correctly. If we had done it incorrectly, for example, I'm going to go back to edge select, select this edge, and just to show you, I'm going to click clear seam. That'll get rid of the seam that we had there, and I'm going to do it again. I'll select the face that should be inside this part, press L, and now we have the whole car selected. That's an indication that you didn't connect all of your edges together the way they should be. So if I add this back in, we'll be all set again. Just mark the seam and you're all set. And I'll just double check again. There's the side of the car. So I mentioned before we want to do the front as well as the top. So we're going to go to edge select, and we want to continue from this over to here and just do mark seam. That will give us the top of the car, except we haven't done it in the back as well. So we want to do, maybe you can choose either of them, I suppose. You could go up here because it would still continue over, but I think I'm going to go with this bottom one and do mark seam. And that's all we have to do for the top. So if we select the top and press L, we only have the top of the car. So that part's all set. Now we want to do the front of the car. So let's go to edge select again. And we want to continue from basically right here. I'm just going to press period to focus in so that my view is a little easier to deal with. And another part of the car you also want to isolate that I didn't mention before is the bottom. Some people will add details to the bottom, but I usually don't. And because I don't worry too much about the bottom. It all just stays one piece. And it usually has a very small UV island. It has a very small amount of texture space, we'll say, because I don't add any details. And I'll explain more about that in a minute when we actually get to UV unwrapping this thing. Right now we're just marking seams. So I got the bottom part of this all the way around, making sure it connects with this other piece here. Go to face select, select the face, press L, and you can see we've done it correctly. It's only this part of the car. And when you're pressing L, I do believe your mouse needs to be within the section you're trying to check. So if I wanted to check the top, press L with your mouse somewhere within the top, and you see that it selects that part. But if I go over here and press L, it would select the side instead. So your mouse position is going to make a difference when you're pressing L to select and test your seams. So now we want the back of the car. Again, we're going to want to continue from the side, basically here. I'm going to press period to focus in. And we want to make sure these connect up, so make sure you get all three of these edges on the side. I'm going to try pressing Alt and Shift See how far that gets me? Not very far. But just continue selecting edges and try to separate the bottom from the back. I do believe that will connect in together. It looks like it does, so that should be all we need. We're just going to press mark seam. And check to make sure we did everything correctly. Select this part, press L. So that's perfect, that's exactly what we want. Go to the bottom of the car to make sure that's perfectly separated. It should be, but just to be sure, select one, press L, and we now have the basics of at least our car. We're still going to need to do smaller things like the mirrors, etc. But to start out, this is a good starting point. So when you're working with UVs and texturing, it's usually a good idea to make a new window. And to do that, we have these little lines up here, these little 3 gray lines or whatever. If you click on these lines and drag it to the left, for example, it opens up a whole new window. And if you wanted to close it, you would click on these lines again and drag it to the right. It'll show this arrow, which means it's going to merge from the left to the right. And if I let go of the mouse, we're back to where we started. So click on these lines and drag it to the left. Now go to this little icon, left click it, and we want to go to the UV image editor. To make this window a little bigger, we can close this by left clicking on it and dragging it until it disappears. You can also use the hotkey N to open and close that window, or you can click the plus sign to open it and drag it closed like I showed you before. So now that we have this, you can adjust the size of each window by sliding these back and forth till you find something that suits your preference. And once you have that, we're all set to UV unwrap this. So I'll usually start with the side, so I'm going to select a face that's on the side, press L to select the entire side, press U for unwrap, and then select unwrap. And now you'll see these UVs here on the right. You can adjust these by moving them around, but for the side, I typically leave it as is, because it usually fits pretty perfectly left to right, the whole size of the UV map, I guess. So next I'm going to do the top, left click, press L to select all of it, U for unwrap, and then choose unwrap. And you'll notice it basically puts it in the same position as the side of our car. So we're going to want to reposition this. And you can do that by pressing G on your keyboard. If you'd like to move it straight up, you can press Y, and that will lock it to only the Y axis. If I right click, press G, say we wanted to only move it left and right, you can press X, and that will constrain it to moving only on the X axis. For this, we're probably going to be resizing it. Well, actually maybe not, because we're going to need more details on, for example, the windshield, so I probably won't be. So I'm going to press G and Y and drag it up. You'll notice we can't see the side UVs right now and that's because they're not selected. So if we press A twice in this window, with our mouse in this window, press A twice, that will select everything, and now we can see them. But now everything on the right is selected, and that may not be what you want. If you want to select only one of these UV islands, select a vertex within that island, press L with your mouse over the island, and now you have only this island selected. So usually with UVs, what you want to do is to pack them as closely together as possible. In other words, you don't want all this extra space here unless you plan to fill it with something else. Because all this wasted space, which is what is considered, would just be space where you're not going to have any texture, but you could have texture there. So you're basically not using pixels when you could be. So a couple things you can do with this is you can rotate it with R, and you can right click to cancel your rotation. You can scale it by pressing S and then either Y to scale in the Y direction or X to scale in the X direction. I'm going to press Y and -1. That will flip it upside down. If you don't want to do that, you can either do the same thing again, SY -1, or since we just recently did it, you could do Control Z to undo it. Sorry. For now, I'm just going to leave it because it's kind of an awkward shape. So we're just going to move to the front and the back. So select a face in the front, press L, then U, unwrap. Press A to select all of it in the UV map. G to drag it up some. S to scale it down, because we're going to need to scale this down some. And we're just going to press A twice to select everything over here. Select the vertex here, press L to select it. And we're going to start positioning this with G, R to rotate, G to move it again, S to scale, and just get it sort of in position. We can move these later. For now, we're just going to try to get a basic idea of how we would like our UVs. So do the same in the back, select one, press L, U to unwrap, select unwrap, press A to select it over here, S to scale, bring it up to this corner, A to select everything over here, A twice actually, select the vertex, press L, scale it back up because it actually needs to be bigger. We will need to leave room for the other parts, so it's fine if we have space because we're going to be using it. You just want to try to make these parts of the car bigger because a lot of times your detail is going to be with these parts of the car, like the lights maybe, or the windows, whatever. These parts of the car are actually the most important, so you want to make sure they have the most space. So we can also do the bottom, but the bottom you can leave till last because it doesn't really need any space. So you can pretty much put it anywhere. You can scale it down to be almost no size at all and like fit it in here or really anywhere that you have space left once you're done. So you want to save the parts you don't really care about for last basically because they can go anywhere. So now what we can do is we can start with the smaller pieces such as the back headlights, and these aren't really headlights, but the last three are more for looks than anything. So I just press period to zoom in this and back to edge select. We're going to need to make some more seams. So for this one, we're going to start selecting these here, and this is going to be a bit different. You don't want to isolate the whole thing from itself. I'm not really the best at explaining like how seams and everything works, but it's kind of like if you imagine like you make a paper like swan or something, but then you glued all the seams together. This is kind of like um, cutting it back apart so that you can unfold it again. And the way you make your seams will determine how it unfolds. And with experience, you'll figure out how this works, no doubt, but I'm still not the best at it, so, don't worry. And I'm probably going to make some mistakes here, which will allow me to show you how to fix it. And this one I don't think is going to work, but I'll just show you anyway. So you select a face, press L again, U to unwrap, and we'll see how it looks. It's probably not going to look the best. Maybe it'll look okay. I mean, that might be okay, actually. And what you want to try to do is you want to think about, where do I want the most detail? Like, for example, here on this light, because this is one of the ones that's a light. These first two are lights. These last three are decorations as far as I can tell. So you're going to want the most detail here on these two faces. So if you select them, you can see where they are. Then if you press L, you can see where the rest of it is. So you want this part to be the biggest, and it's actually the smallest right now, so we can fix that. To do that, we just select the part we want to make bigger, which is basically this part. You could select these two as well if you want. I mean, I might do that, I guess. Probably not though, because this piece here is actually this side piece. And then you can press S, and then in this case we're going to press Y. And that will give this more texture space while giving these other parts less. But we don't really care about the outer parts because this inner part is really the most important. This is where we might add like little flares to try to make it look like a light or something. I'm not sure what we're going to do, but if we do something, this is where it's going to be. So we want to make sure this part has the most texture space, so it has the most detail from our texture. So anyway, once that's done, we're going to select all of it by pressing A twice over here on the right. Scale it down some, and we're just going to move it out of the way for a minute. And then press A twice over here, and we can see where everything is. Select one of these, press L, and you can start positioning these. I'm not really sure where I want to put them, but just continue resizing it with S to scale. And I guess for now we'll just put them here. We'll probably end up moving it, but anyway. Back to edge select, we're going to do the same on this one. We're going to select these edges. There's two on the top and two on the bottom. And then press mark seam. Go to face select, select a face, press L, U to unwrap, select unwrap. Do the same thing again. We want to increase the amount of size that this part has, so select it, press S and then Y to increase the texture space. When you're happy with it, press A twice, S to scale it down. And instead of moving these into position every time, we can just wait until we get a few more, and then we'll reposition them. So I'm just going to move it down here for now to keep it out of the way, to keep it away from the rest of the textures, or the UVs rather. And then go back to edge select, and then do the same thing with this one here. Click mark seam, back to face select, select a face, and actually with this one, there's some cleaning up we could do. I think we can get rid of these vertices here, so I'm going to be in vertex select and just start merging these to the left with Alt M. Leave the back ones like before so we don't mess up anything as far as the connection. Okay, so that looks fine. We still have our seam here, so go back to face select, select a face, press L, U for unwrap, unwrap it, and again we're going to want to increase the size This one looks a little funny over here on this other side. That's because we have a bunch of extra vertices here, so we can get rid of these. I thought we did this before, maybe we didn't, but I'm just going to start merging these together. I'm going to get rid of these side, well, I'll get rid of this one. Merge this one down. Merge these across. And I might be able to get rid of this one too. I'm going to see what happens. That looks fine, so I'm going to stick with that. That looks fine, but now that we made changes, we're going to have to unwrap this again. But there's a lot of extra vertices on the bottom. I guess we're just going to have to deal with it. So select the face, L, U to unwrap, select unwrap, and all the extra vertices there are now gone, so it's a little cleaner. Press S and then Y to scale the UVs up. A twice. S to scale it down. Move it out of the way. And this one's a little different because it has a point on this side and it also has a point on this side, so we're probably going to have to do something slightly different. But I could just try it by selecting this edge, select this edge. And it actually looks like there's two edges here. And there is. So I'm going to go to vertex select. See if we have two vertices here. No, it's the bottom does though. So I'm going to select this vertex that's on the right. Hold shift, select this other one, Alt M, and choose that last. They're basically on top of each other. And we don't need them that way. Go back to face, oh no, edge select, sorry. Select this edge, hold shift, select that one. We're going to need these other two edges as well, I think. Mark the seam, face select. Select the face, press L, U to unwrap, select unwrap. And just to make sure which faces you have or you want to increase the size of, you can hold shift and just select and deselect them. You can see it's this face and this face, as well as this little tiny one. That's going to need to be bigger than that if you want your texture to look anything decent. So we're going to select these over here with box select, SY, and I think I'm going to stretch this on the X as well. So S and then X, and maybe not. Maybe I'll do this by hand and see what happens. But I'm just going to select these two and drag them over on the X, so GX, just to make sure we have more texture space for that. And now I've got this weird line up here. Excellent. There we go, it's gone. Now select all this stuff. You can either use box select or do the A twice thing. Scale it down with S, drag it out of the way with G. And on to the last one. Select these edges, do two on the top, two on the bottom. Mark seam, back to face select, select the face, L, U, choose unwrap. And again, we're going to need to make these bigger. So just press S to scale, make it bigger. You can use S and then Y to make it a little bigger. That may cause distortion, but we'll see how it goes. Then scale it down and G to drag it out of the way. So now that we have all those done, we can press A twice over here and we can start positioning them a little better. We can always change the position later and try to make the scale relatively the same. So like if you want to match it to that size, try to make them all that size, because It'll just keep your texture quality more consistent. So for example, I'm scaling it on the Y to try to make it as wide as this one. And you just have to make adjustments to the UVs as you see fit. And we can adjust them later, so it's not like this is set in stone. We're just trying to set up the basic setup here. So that's basically done. We're going to move on to these pieces here. Go to edge select, and I'm going to just hold Alt. Well, yeah, just hold Alt. Right click on this edge. That'll get this whole loop. And because we don't have any faces on the backside, this is going to work out nice. So we're just going to press Mark Seam, or at least it should work out nice. Don't quote me. Go to Face Select, select this face, press L, and then U, Unwrap. So that came out pretty nice. We're just going to leave it like that. Actually, I want to see which faces are these ones here, because those are really small. So if we're going to add any detail, it's actually going to be on these outer edges, because there's an option where you can change the color of this outer part right here. So we want to be able to do that, and with it being this size, we really won't be able to easily without it looking like not so good. So select some of these. I'm going to use circle select. You can use basically most of the standard selection options, and then just right click when you're done. S to scale, choose like the Y, and that's probably not going to work too well, so I'm just going to press Ctrl Z and undo it. I think I'm just going to slide these, because that's probably going to work a little better. I'm going to see if edge slide works with Q. That's not going to work. Okay, so Q again to get rid of that red circle, whatever that was. Shift V, we'll see if that works. No. So we're just going to have to move these by hand. So do G and then Y. Drag them up. So if you hold Alt and right click, apparently that still works to get this edge loop. Then G, Y, drag it down. We just want more texture space here, and I'm going to try to move these individually to keep the original shape a little closer to what it was. That should be fine. So I'm going to scale it down, drag it out of the way with G. And we'll do the same over here. Back to edge select, hold Alt, right click, mark seam, face select, select the face, L, U, unwrap. Do the same again. We're going to need to hold Alt, right click, G and then Y, drag these up because we want more space. Alt and right click, G, Y, drag it down. Try to keep the same basic shape as what it had before to reduce distortion. Select all of it by pressing A twice, scale it down, drag it out of the way with G. Next we'll handle these. Whenever you get to the center of the car, you automatically have an automatic seam because of our mirror modifier. So the center of the car, anything that's directly on the center of the car, is going to already basically have the equivalent of what a seam would be. So it can help you to unwrap things if you understand that concept, and you'll get the idea as you do more and more UV unwraps. You'll kind of understand. So basically this is already a seam, even though it doesn't show that it is. So because of that, we can approach this slightly differently and just maybe, well, first we have some vertices here I'd like to get rid of. So I'm going to go to vertex select, select this vertex and this one, Alt M, choose that last, do the same here. That gets rid of our extra vertices, and now select those edges. And I think that should be okay. So I'm going to do mark seam, face select, select a face, L, U, unwrap. Perhaps not what we want. It's just kind of an awkward shape and I'm not sure I like it. So I'm going to just clear the seam, go back to edge select, and we'll try it again. We'll do like the standard. We'll do the standard 2 and 2 on the top and bottom. Mark seam, see how this goes. It's kind of maybe an easier shape to deal with. So although we do have an extra vertex down here that we can get rid of, you can kind of see it like here where there's two vertices very close. That's kind of what tipped me off that there was another one here, so I'm just going to merge those two. And looks like it got rid of the seam, so I'm going to have to mark it again. Select, L, U, unwrap. It's a bit better. So I'm going to select all of it, scale it down, drag it out of the way with G. Do the same here. 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, mark seam. Face select, L, U, unwrap. A to select everything, S to scale it down, drag it out of the way. I think these are just like solid black, so it's not going to matter if we have extra texture space here. If we need it, we can change it later. For now, to save time, we'll just pretend we don't need it, and we're just going to mark the seams. 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, select the face, press L, U to unwrap, A to select everything, scale it down, drag it out of the way. I'm just going a little quicker because this is going to take a little bit of time, and I don't want it to take too much time. So I'm going to press A twice so we can see what we're dealing with, and we're going to start moving things around. So it's kind of a mess over here, don't worry. I'll show you how to deal with it. But I'm going to start with this, select it, press L to select all of it, scale it down. I don't even remember what this is, to be honest. Which piece of the car that is. So if you ever forget, you can go down here, press your middle mouse, and you can scroll through all the different bottom options here, I guess. And the one I'm looking for is this. And it says keep the UV and edit mode mesh selection in sync. And if you don't understand what that does, just click it. And basically what it means is anything we have selected over here is going to be selected over here. So if I select this face, it immediately changes the selection to this face because that's the one that corresponds to the one that I selected. So now we know that it's this piece. Now that we know that, we can leave this on for now, I guess, and I'm just going to press L, select this, drag it up here somewhere. Maybe we can put these up here. I'm just going to press R to rotate and see if we can fit these up here. So it looks like they might fit well up here. And you can scroll up and down to zoom in. Just continue rotating it and positioning it with G. R for rotate. Make sure it doesn't go outside of this checkerboard pattern. And then do the same here. Select the face, press L, G to grab it, bring it over, R to rotate, S to scale. Again, you're probably going to want to try to keep these two similar in size. They don't have to be perfect. I don't think it's going to make too much of a difference considering what they are. And the other thing you want to watch out for is you don't want any overlap. So you don't want this UV island overlapping with this. For example, down here. You want to be very careful that they don't overlap, because that will cause problems when you're texturing. So it looks pretty good. Now down here, select the face, press L, and that'll help you differentiate between which one is which. Just by pressing L, it'll select all the ones that are connected. So these are that part, so I'm just going to keep it together with these other pieces, sort of, because these other pieces are the other things right here, and this is this one, so they'll all sort of be together. You don't have to be organized, but it's definitely a plus to be organized. It'll make your life a little bit easier. Almost done with this. Continue scaling with S, R to rotate, G to grab. And if you'd like to, you can flip things around with like S, X, -1. You could flip this around if you wanted, but I don't think I really want to. I'm just giving you an example, and you can use Control-Z to undo changes just like you can when you're modeling. So that's going to be fine for now. And actually, one thing I remembered about the back is, you know how I talked about not wanting to mirror the license plate? We actually don't want to mirror the back of the car either, and I'll show you why. I'm going to open a new Blender file, one that I've already started working on. This is the same one, just wait for the other one to load. I'm going to have to find it. It's this one. So what am I talking about here? I'm going to get rid of this purple, just, you may not like purple, I don't know. And we're going to go to texture paint. Okay. So the reason I don't want the back to be mirrored, or at least my thinking behind this, is if you look at this test picture here, this is supposed to be basically carbon fiber, or it has a similar look to carbon fiber. That's basically the texture I made for my carbon fiber. However, at the center, remember I said it basically there's basically a seam at the center, and this is the part where it gets mirrored. So we have basically this upside down V shape with our carbon fiber. But if you look at the real thing, and I'm not sure this shows it very well, but it's left to right, or I mean right to left in this case, at least on the top. And I can't really tell. Maybe it does flip over to left to right, because it does look left to right over here. I was going to say that maybe I thought it kept the same direction of the grain, but from this, I'm actually starting to wonder if that's true or not. So I guess I'll look into that. But it does seem to be left to right on the bottom pretty consistently on both sides. So I'll have to look into that. But my reasoning was going to be we were going to try to keep it all going in the same direction, and we can still do that. But we'll have to get rid of the mirror basically so that we can keep it all going the same direction. And okay. So there's that. So we'll forget about that for now. I'll figure it out if I want to go back and change it. It'll mean that the back will basically be twice as big on the texture UV thing. Because right now we only have half of it. Half the back is here, the rest of it's mirrored, so it's all basically one giant piece instead of being two pieces like it would be. But anyway, we will continue by going to Edge Select, And I want to isolate this, so I'm going to just go select, linked, Shift H to hide everything except for this. And we'll take a look at this, see how we can possibly unwrap this thing. And I think I'm just gonna make it we'll do similar to like the light things, or whatever you want to call them. See how it works. So make sure you get all of them all the way around except for the front. You don't want to select anything over there, like possibly that one I don't think I want. And I'm just going to mark seam and see how this goes. Honestly not sure how this is going to end up, but press L, U, unwrap. That's pretty crappy. So this is actually a good example of what you don't want. You can see it's all a mess. Look at this mess right here. Everything's crossing over itself. That's terrible. So that's a good example of what you don't want. Right there. So now to fix that, I think instead we'll just maybe, well, I should do it on the bottom. Go across the bottom here a bit. Not all the way to the end. And I'm just going to experiment a little. And you can feel free to experiment on your own. That gives us an interesting result. However, whatever this piece is extremely small compared to the rest of it. So we may want to add some more over here, more seams. And right now it's basically just a guess and check strategy. I'm not very good at UV unwrapping, as you can probably tell if you know what you're doing. But that doesn't look very good either. I can tell you that. Just like you can tell basically because there's a lot of faces right here and they're all overlapping and all this other stuff. It's bad news. So maybe what we will do is we'll just go all the way across on the bottom. And maybe undo these by clearing the seam. Unwrapping it again. So these are really causing a problem. Where is all this stuff here? Right here. This is really causing a problem. So this part right here, this is not good. But it really didn't change anything. So this part's just really wonky, I guess. What you could do if you want to make it a little simpler is just isolate this part entirely by marking the seam there. So now we can unwrap each piece individually, except that I messed up the UV see, we missed a thing here. Maybe that was part of the problem. I missed an edge. I'm gonna try this again and see, like without these, and see if that actually was the problem, because I'm curious. Yes it was. Okay, so I just missed an edge. That's really the only reason that that was coming out so messed up, is that I missed an edge. This looks pretty perfect, like everything is nice. And that's basically how you want it, I suppose. So I'm done with that. I'm going to press Alt-H to unhide everything. Before I forget, I thought about it a couple times, but I'm going to press Tab to get out of edit mode. Select this license plate, tab to get into edit mode. We have these faces in the back that we should really get rid of before I forget yet again. So you want to select the back faces, make sure the top ones are not selected and the back ones are. Just press delete faces because you don't need them and you shouldn't have them. So that takes care of that. Press tab, select the car again, press tab. Next we'll do these pieces, I suppose. L to select all of it once you've selected one piece. L to select this other piece. Shift H so that we have only this to deal with. And we have faces in the bottom that we need to get rid of, so select them, delete, choose faces. And another thing when you're doing UVs, usually you want to try to hide the seam in a position where the viewer is not likely to see it. So for example, this back seam would be very obvious because when people are looking at the back of the car, they'll see the seam if you put it here. But if you put the seam here, even when they're looking from the front, this piece still sort of obscures their view. So this is a good place to put a seam if you're going to put it somewhere around here. And the same goes for this one with the same reasoning, that it's obscured by this piece. So we're just going to click mark seam. It'll mark the seam for both objects. And now we'll see how that looks. This one I think should probably be okay. So I'm going to select it. Nope. I got to go around the top a bit more here and make some more seams. And we actually, you know what? We can get rid of these top faces as well, because they're hidden in that air brake. So now we can just try this again, and it should be fine now. Yep. Scale it down, move it out of the way. Do the same here. Select L, U, unwrap. Scale it down, move it out of the way. Alt H to unhide everything. So at this point we got a couple things we can start positioning. So I'm just going to start selecting them, pressing L one at a time, scaling, and moving them with G, rotating them with R if you need to. This is that little skinny piece, so this really doesn't need much detail at all. We could probably try stuffing it in here, because I think this is just going to be one solid color, and it's not going to matter how much texture space it has. So I'm just going to do the same with this one. Press L to select it, and G to move it, S to scale. And these aren't going to need much space at all, so we're just going to try to fit them in wherever they fit nicely and kind of ignore how much space we give them. Give them as much space as possible in the smallest space possible. If that makes any sense, because they're really not that important. They're just going to be one solid color. If you want to make it different, you can give it more texture space, but I think for mine that's going to be good enough. And this piece here is just a solid color as well. It's really small though, but we can change it if we need to, but that's really not very big. So if we ever want to add detail, it's going to be hard. So next, I guess we'll do this. We'll just keep moving our way towards the front of the car. We did all of the back, I guess, except the license plate. So we'll just do this. L to select it. Don't forget we have this little edge down here as well. Press L over that when your mouse is hovered over it to select it. Shift H, and we can start working on this part. Just keep in mind that these are two separate pieces, but actually I don't even think we need a seam for this first bottom part because it already has one basically on the center, and I'll show you. You'll see the proof basically that there's a seam already there. So just press L over it, press U, unwrap. See, it's not connected, it's all separate. So that's basically shows you sort of an example of why, or that there is a seam there. And again, that's going to be a solid color, so I'm not going to worry about how much texture space we give it. I can just press H now to hide it because we're done with it. This piece, I don't know if we need any seams, so I'm just going to select it, press L, U, unwrap, see what happens. And that actually is probably fine, to be honest. There's no real crazy stuff going on. So I'm going to just scale it down. This is a piece where we will need a lot of detail, or yeah, at least a reasonable amount, because we're going to need to color these pieces this silver or grayish color. We're also going to want to make this window here. This is the part that actually where the window is. So we are going to need to add a lot of detail to this piece, which means in terms of texture space, it's going to need to be as big as possible. So I'm going to press Alt H to unhide everything. And I think we didn't move this into position, so I'm going to start moving these into position. So one thing I didn't talk about yet is, or I didn't fully talk about, is the carbon fiber. Like, basically it's optional. There's certain pieces of this car that can have carbon fiber, and there's certain pieces that can't. Most of it can't, some of it can. This air brake here is one of them that can. I actually have a list, which I'll put on screen real quick so you can see, of all the official things that can have variations in their color, sort of. So these are the options that the McLaren dealership basically gives you, I suppose. The air brake can be carbon fiber, or it can be the color of the body. So if we make the car's overall color blue, then the body color would be blue. So it can be carbon fiber or whatever color you choose your car to be. So the air brake again is this part I have selected. And since it can be carbon fiber, that means we can have that little diagonal pattern, and that actually is going to require some texture space to do that, because it's not a solid color. It does have a texture to it, as you can see. Like, this is the pattern, and if you don't give enough texture space, it's not going to look very good. So this one does need to be reasonably sized. And the other things are the diffuser. It can be carbon fiber or black. So the diffuser is this bottom piece down here. I'll just select it real quick so you know what it is. It's basically this, as well as, you know, the top right here. Not going to select all of it, but it would be like, you know, this whole thing here is the rear diffuser. That can also be carbon fiber. The front splitter can be carbon fiber or black. For example, here, this is the black one, but it can also be carbon fiber. So it's that part of the car. Just kind of keep that in your mind. I'm not going to bother showing on the model because we'll do that later. The mirrors can be carbon fiber, or they can be the body color. So this is an example of the body color. It's orange, just like the orange right here. I don't think, yeah, you can't tell on this which one that is, but they can also be carbon fiber, just like this would be. They would look black with that pattern. The rear bumper, it can be carbon fiber or gray. So that is basically the rest of the back except for this. So like this part, all the way up till it gets to this light part. That can be black or carbon fiber. The door blade, which is something I didn't know the name of before, can be carbon fiber or black. The door blade is this piece. This entire piece can be either carbon fiber or black. The side intakes are either carbon fiber or the body color. And I don't have a picture, so it's just this. This is the side intake that they're talking about, this whole thing, carbon fiber or black. The exhaust and hydraulics can be, I just call them hydraulics. I don't know if they're actually hydraulics, but that's just what I call them. They can be black or silver, so it's still a solid color, it's black or silver. But the exhaust I'm talking about is that ring that I showed you earlier that I wanted to make extra space for. It's this ring right here that they're talking about. It can be black or silver. As well as these hydraulic things that we just barely unwrapped. As well, and the front one as well. So black or silver for those. And the McLaren badge can be red or black with a carbon fiber look. This is the example of the red one. This is the badge, this little red swirly thing, whatever you call it. It can also be black with a carbon fiber look, so it can be black and look like this, sort of. There's two options there. And the model designation on the door blades can be removed. So this right here, the 650S, it's optional. You can take that off if you want. So those are just little things to keep in mind when you're actually making, if you're trying to make a more realistic car, you want to try to look at the manufacturer's website. Take a look at the different options that you have for colors, styling, all those things. And that's exactly what I did to get this list. See exactly what you can do, at least from the manufacturer. Of course, you can color the car anything you want after you buy it, but that's just the standard options that you have there, which will be important to remember when you're doing unwrapping. For example, that we want carbon fiber to be possible with this means that this needs to be larger than perhaps some of the other pieces. And it looks like it's going to fit fairly well right in here. And this part also needs a lot of texture space. Remember, we're going to have to draw in this window, so that's going to need to be pretty large as well. Perhaps bigger than this, so we might not want to put it over here. We could put it here, for example, or maybe up there. Right now I'm not sure which one would be better. Probably up here, just to make sure it has enough space to really stand out, I guess, because it's going to be an important part of the back. If that doesn't look good, it's going to ruin the rest of it. But I'm not sure if that's any bigger than it would be over here. And it sort of is, so I'm going to leave it up there, I guess, and we'll add in little things around it to fill in the empty space, because there's going to be quite a bit of empty space, like here and down here and over here. For now, we'll just not worry about it and continue with the rest of it. This won't need much texture space. We could just try to fit it like here or something, which isn't a terrible idea. And if you need to, we could even pull some of these UVs down, because I don't think it's going to make much difference if this is a little distorted. It's just going to be one color for that, as far as I can tell. So I may just do that, switch to vertex select, and we'll just get some of these out of the way so that we can fit something else more important in this area. If it distorts things, we'll just unwrap it and do the process over again until we get what we need. So that is the back of the car. We can do the license plate real quick. So in object mode, select the license plate, tab to edit mode. We may need a few seams. Alright, I'm just going to select an edge and press period because my view's all messed up. Select a couple of these edges, mark seam, and I'll do it on the other side because this is not mirrored, remember? So you're going to have to do things on both sides because it's not mirrored, and it's actually quite difficult. It's giving me problems. And I don't need problems. Alright, then mark the seam on those two. Back to face select. Select everything. U to unwrap. And it's about as good as it's going to get. So, scale it down. We can add this, even though it's a different, it's an entirely different mesh, we can add it to the UVs of the other one. So, but you have to take a look at where your UVs are on this one and then try to eyeball it and be like, alright, this wouldn't be a bad spot, this wouldn't be a bad spot, and then go back, press tab again, and then try to position it like over here, whatever, and just hope that it's in a good spot compared to this other one. So it needs to be down here, down here, we'll change it if we need to, but yeah, it makes it a little more difficult to actually position it, but yeah, you can do it. So I'm going to select the car again in object mode, press tab, let's go back to edit mode, and now that that's done, and we need to do, what do we need to do? The front of the car? We did the top, yes, yes. So select the front, L to select all of it, U to unwrap, select unwrap, and actually we did the front. Okay, I'm going to press Ctrl Z to put it back where it is. What didn't we do? The mirrors, okay. I'm going to press period to focus in. These are actually two separate pieces. You'll probably remember this bottom piece is all one piece, the top piece is all one piece. And I'm just going to press Z. There's an extra face here. We're going to delete this. Press delete, choose faces, get rid of that. And we can, I'm going to isolate this, so I'm just going to go to select linked, Shift H to hide everything else, and I'm going to mark these seams, see how this works. Actually, I want the top one to be marked and not this one, because this top one's going to be hidden. Select all of it, U for unwrap, and we got some weird stuff going on, so we need more details down here. Mark the seam, L, U, unwrap, much better. Drag it out of the way with G, Alt H to unhide the rest of it. Select something here, press L, Shift H to hide everything else. And remember, this is our mirror, so if we do add details, it's going to be right here where the mirror itself is. But you'll also remember the mirror can be carbon fiber, so this whole thing has the chance to be relatively higher detail compared to the rest of the car, so you just want to keep that in mind. So one side that's kind of more hidden is like this side, so if you're going to add UVs, this side's probably a decent part to start with. And if we go along where the mirror part would be, that's probably not a bad option either. So if we go something like this, I'm just going to see where we're at by unwrapping this. And surprisingly, doesn't look too horrible. You can sort of take a look at what you have here. These are kind of small, like you see right here. These are small compared to these. These are pretty big. And these other ones are quite large, even though they don't need to be. So I'm going to just add a few more seams, see what we get for a result. That made these quite a bit bigger actually, so that's probably a better option on that. And what are these? Okay, that's fine. The side of it doesn't really need as much detail perhaps, but if it's going to be carbon, we might want to try to add it anyway. So at this point it's just a sort of guess and check. I'm no UV expert by any means. And I think we could probably get away with this. We could always scale these out a little if we wanted. Whoops. I got a bunch of extra stuff, so I'm going to do B, middle mouse click to get rid of those. And just select the ones that I want. With circle select, why does that continuously keep getting that entire edge? Because those vertices are shared with this, okay. So that's not going to work. So I guess we can just get rid of these seams and stick with what we had, because that's probably not going to work too well. This looks fine. It's a bit more of a better shape. It's not so awkward. It's more not really rectangular-ish, but it's more, I don't know, I like it better. So we'll see how it goes. Alt H to unhide everything. what do we have left? We get the wheels, which are pretty easy. I usually leave wheels till the end because they're like super easy. Getting everything else positioned is a lot more difficult, usually. And we have this piece that we need to do. And I don't actually think like this end cap is can be carbon fiber. I just think it's like this blade itself. This little cap piece is just black, I think. I'm not sure about that, but we'll see. I'm gonna do select linked, Shift H, and we'll take a look at this. These interfaces, I don't think we need them, so I'm gonna delete them. And I'm gonna press Alt H just to make sure that we don't need them. Because like, I don't want to delete it if it's actually going to make a difference, and I don't think it is. Nobody's going to notice that they're gone. So I'm going to do select linked again, Shift H. And now we could actually separate these if you wanted to completely separate this end piece from the blade itself. Or you have the option of not doing that, and my view's all messed up, so I'm going to press period on the number pad to correct that. I'm just going to leave those faces because, I don't know, whatever. This one's kind of important, but... So I think I'm just going to separate both of these just in case they do end up being different colors and whatever. It'll just make it a little easier to select things later on. So I made sure there's a seam around all of it. If I press L, this whole part is sort of kept separate. We can press U, unwrap this. And if this is going to be carbon fiber, we probably are going to have to try to make this a bit bigger somehow. I don't know if scaling just these two will be a viable option or not. So I'm just going to leave it the way it is, drag it out of the way. We'll try to find a good spot for that, because if it's any smaller than this, the detail is probably going to be pretty terrible, just because these faces are pretty small as it is. They're pretty skinny. Like we could, for one, we could increase these. What is this vertex here? What the heck is that? Hey. Okay, you need to be in face select mode to do linked. Okay. I don't know what those faces are. Like, what are these vertices? Oh, it's that? Okay, never mind. Anyway, back to vertex select. What I was going to do is like make these bigger, at least, by doing S and then Y. Well, it's not going to work, so maybe slide it up some with G and then Y. G, Y, slide these down. Alright, well that's enough messing around with this. So we're going to unwrap this other piece. First we need some seams. The bottom's usually the best spot to do it, so toss in a couple seams. Mark the seam. Select it with L. U, unwrap, see what happens. What is this one? It's not important, so we're going to forget about that and just leave it the way it is. If it's just a black thing, if it's just going to be a black color, it's not going to matter anyway. So we're going to press Alt H and now start positioning things. This was what? The bottom of the light, which actually this part's not able to be carbon fiber. It's only the light itself, or not the light, but the mirror. It's only the mirror part. This is always a black color. It's a solid color. So this can go anywhere. And anywhere looks like it might be perhaps over here, because this awkward shape kind of fits in with this other awkward shape. So it's going to find a home right over here, I think. Although it's not quite fitting as well as I thought it would. Do. Maybe try over here. And that actually doesn't need to be that big, so we could make it a lot smaller. We could, I don't know, I'm probably just going to put it over here because I know it's not going to need to be very big. And that's kind of a waste making it that big over there. We're just going to make it fit over here, because that's just the way it's going to be. That's more than enough space for something that's going to be one solid color. And now we're just going to move the rest of it. This as well, same deal. It's going to be a solid color, so we don't need much space at all. Which means it probably could just go up here. I don't know if there's going to be anything else that's going to fit this spot. So there we go. This piece does need detail because it's the carbon fiber / mirror thing. Up here possibly, I think this may be enough space for what we're doing. Looks kind of like a fish with a really bad tail. But that should be good. Just make sure nothing's overlapping. Be very careful not to overlap things. That's going to cause problems. This piece, I have no idea. It's going to need a lot of space because shrinking it much more than that is really not going to be good as far as texturing goes. It's going to be pretty crappy. It's going to look pretty crappy if we don't keep it basically the same size as it is. So something like this, I suppose. Maybe do S and then Y to try to make it take up more space in the Y direction to sort of fill it up a bit. And that should be about as good as it's going to get for that thing. So, well actually, you know what I forgot? That's fine. We can move the license plate because the license plate was here. That's alright. We'll just put it like here or something. The wiper blade, that's going to be tricky because we're running out of space, which is a common problem with UV unwrapping. So I press tab to go to object mode. We're going to select this wiper blade, tab into edit mode. It may be easier if we hide the car, so I'm actually going to go back to object mode, select the car, H to hide it, select the wiper blade, tab into edit mode. Make sure we get rid of the faces on the bottom here. We did. Perfect. So we're going to start. Alright, so this is one piece. How do we want to do this? Probably, so the least visible part of this would be like right here. Because you see basically from almost no angle you can see that part. So that's a good spot to put your seams. And we'll see how that looks by pressing L, U, unwrap, and it's not the best as expected. Oh. Why did that select everything? Okay. Well, it's still not the best, so what is causing a problem? Oh, this end over here. Since it's connected with like a face at the end, it's gonna need some seams over here. And that looks a lot better. So keeping with the theme, we're just gonna make the same seams over here. Whoops. Mark the seam. Try to copy exactly the same as what you did last time, and it'll come out exactly the same, basically. There you go, both of them. They look basically the same, so perfect. Now we got this thing, which is a little strange shape. I'm just going to press Shift H to hide everything except for this period on the number pad. This is going to be an interesting one to unwrap for sure. And we may even just separate these little spoke things from the main square, rectangle, whatever it is. That'd probably be the easiest way to do this. But I guess first we'll just see what happens. Because it's always, I think it's always better. Well, I don't know if it's always better, but a lot of times I like to just keep it all one mesh. Because that helps keep you from using up more texture space than you really need. I'm just sort of guessing at this point, and I think, yeah, we're probably just going to make it, we'll do it the faster way, and just completely separate these away from the rest of it, because this is a strategy that's going to be a lot easier. It's not going to be difficult to deal with. We're just going to clear the seam on the end. It's not as difficult. I'm still probably going to make some mistakes, I'm sure, but we'll see how this looks. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. So you unwrap, strangeness over here. It's this piece. Why are we still getting the whole thing? Because I forgot an edge? Yep. So now it's totally isolated. And it's probably going to need some work right here. Yep. So I will separate some of this as well, I suppose. We're getting there. A little more work to do. Still having problems with that. So we'll just make this its own section, and that will just solve that. So this part right here, it's just going to be its own piece. That's the easy way to deal with that, except it's still messed up. This is really not going the best. Not going the best here. So what do we need to change? Make some seams. So this part's all by itself. That'll be fine. It's all going to be a whole bunch of billion pieces, but now that we did that, I don't think we need to segregate this piece now. So we can get rid of these seams, I think. Yep, and that looks nice. So after a little tinkering, and that's what it's going to take, like with your own models and stuff, like it's not really super simple to pick up on the concept of UV unwrapping. At least it wasn't really for me. I still have problems with it, of course, as you can see, but practice is really the best way. So I need some seams here because I'm trying to match the bottom one. I think that's pretty close. So I'm just going to start unwrapping. Nice. And if you want it to be the same orientation, just do R90. There you go. Looks exactly the same, basically, as the other one. So now on to this part. I'm just going to see what it looks like if I unwrap it to see how it comes out. And it basically looks like a sword. So that might be what you want. Maybe not. This part's a little small. If you want to increase the texture size, you can select these vertices and just scale them up a bit. There was just this weird like line right there. It just means that this quad is all messed up. So I'm trying to fix it. That looks good, I guess. I don't think there's going to be much detail there anyway. So I'm going to press Alt-H, get the rest of it. Now we need this part. Select all of it, Shift-H. And we'll start making some seams again, probably around here or so. Well, actually, I'm just going to start with this side. Make some seams around here. Do the same on this other side. And then make a seam maybe here where it's not going to be seen. And we'll see how this unwraps. There are some issues over here. Because I forgot to make a seam right there. That very small edge right there where it's all... Alright, so I'm going to select this and press period. But yeah, this very small edge where it's not red, that was the problem. I'm going to try unwrapping again. Looks a lot better. So that's what I'm going to stick with. So there's not really anything messed up there. It's all kind of small, but we can deal with it. So Alt H, unhide everything. That is our windshield wiper, which we can position. Once we get rid of this mirror modifier, I think I'm gonna join everything together to make it a lot easier to just line things up. But I went back to object mode. I'm gonna do Alt H to unhide everything. So what is left is the wheels, the bottom. So we might as well just do those real quick. Select the car, press tab. Select the bottom, L, U, unwrap. Scale it way down, because like this is the part where I add no detail at all. So I don't care if it has basically zero texture space. It's not going to bother me one bit. If you want to add detail to the bottom, you're going to have to approach it differently. It's going to need more space. It's going to need to be more like the top or the side. It's going to need to be bigger if you plan on putting any type of actual detail. Just be aware that the size will need to be more like these two rather than basically non-existent. But you can give it as much space as you have available. That's why I usually do it last, because it's always a good idea to use the texture space that's available. Even if you don't really need it, you can just make this thing huge if you have a ton of space. There's no downside to giving it more space other than it's going to make less space for everything else. So if you do it last, no problem. So the wheels. The way I do the wheels is I'll just completely isolate the side that's facing us, as well as the side that's not. And the reason being is this side right here, that's on the inside, no one's ever going to see it. So it's going to be like the bottom of the car. We don't need any space at all. However, this side's completely the opposite. It needs to have a lot of detail because we're going to be drawing on it. We're going to be trying to make it look like a wheel. So when we unwrap this by pressing U and scale it down, we want to make this as big as possible. And a common place you might want to put them is like right where the wheel goes. It should fit in that area, right? But if you have a spot where with more texture space, so if it was able to be larger up here than it is down there, you may want to move it around. It doesn't need to be right where the wheel goes, but that's going to be where I'm going to put it in this case. And for the tread, it's going to be quite interesting how the tread gets done. We're actually going to select all the tire by doing select and then linked, Shift H to hide everything else. So this part gets a little interesting. I'm not sure. I'm going to try something real quick. It's been a while since I've unwrapped a tire like this. So I'm going to press U. I selected all this first by holding Alt, right-clicking on the edge. I'm going to press U and do Light Map Pack instead. Usually what this does is it makes it all squares like this. And I'm not sure if that's what we want or not. I'm going to just try the other way, which is just select all the edges. Mark the seam. Well, actually, no, you don't want to do that. So I'm going to press Control Z, undo that until the red goes away. You want to mark one seam on the bottom. And then we'll select this whole thing by pressing L. U, and then choose Unwrap. Okay. Alright, so this looks more like what I want. They're rectangles, which is what these are. They're not squares, they're rectangles. So the UVs kind of match that. I'm going to press R, Y, and then -90 to line these up a bit. And with the tire, you want any texture that's on this face is going to be exactly the same as any texture that's on this face. So if we draw a straight line, instead of drawing a straight line through all these faces, we can just do it on this one, and it will repeat through all of the faces. And the way that we do that is we put them on top of each other, perfectly on top of each other. So over here we select the face, G to grab, hold Control to snap just like before, and it's not entirely working now. It should be. Perhaps the snapping options are incorrect, so I'm going to use middle mouse to go over here, and they are. Click on this little thing, choose vertex to change the snapping to vertex. So you want to click on this little icon. It was on increment, you want it to be vertex. Now select one, G to grab, and snap it to the bottom one. Continue the process, select one, G to grab, snap it to the bottom, select it, press G, hold Control, left click once it's into position, select it, G, hold Control, left click when it's in position, continue until you're done. Perfect. So that is the front wheel. We still need to unwrap this, so I'm going to select it with L, U, unwrap, scale it down. I'm not going to position it yet, so I'm just going to put it on the side. We're going to press Alt H to unhide everything. And we're going to do the exact same for the back wheel, so this is good practice. You want to isolate the front that's facing the direction that everyone's going to look, so you mark the seam, make sure you get all the way around. You want to also mark a seam on the bottom for our tread, and then you want to make sure you get all the inside. See, if it's difficult to do it, just do select, linked, Shift H, get rid of everything else so it's not in your way, and then make sure you get the inner part of the wheel all the way around, mark seam. We'll just unwrap this real quick by selecting it with L, U, unwrap, scale it down, drag it out of the way. Do the same here, select, U, unwrap. I'm going to keep this one over here just so we know this is the front one. These are the bottom ones, or the back ones, like over here. Select this with L, U, unwrap, R, Y, -90, press enter. And now for this, the back tires are going to have the same tread as the front tires. So we're going to need the front tires selected first. So we're going to press Alt H, unhide them. Select the tread, press L to get all of it. Hold Shift. Well, you don't have to hold Shift, just press L over this tread. Shift H to hide everything else. And since this tread's going to be the same as this tread, we're just going to put these on top of this. So press G, hold Control, And maybe it's not the same size. Something's a little off here. So I think we need to make it a bit wider. I'm going to press Control Z. Select all these. I think they need to be a bit wider. So press S, X, slightly wider. Try again. Snap it. That looks basically perhaps a little too wide. So I'm going to Control Z, select it again, S, X, hold Shift to do a small adjustment, test it again, see if it's the right size. It's too small this time. Okay, so S, X, S, X, 1.01 is what I'm going to enter, and we will see if this matches. Slightly more. You don't really have to be a perfectionist, I don't think, but SX 1.005. And let's see if this will match. I'm gonna say that's close enough because I think it is. So we're just gonna start snapping these together. Select one, press G, hold Alt, left click when it's in position. Select G, Control, select G, Control, left click, select G, Control, left click until you're done. So now that we have that, we can select all of them with box select. So press B, drag it out, select all of them, press G to move it. And when we start texturing, you'll see exactly why we did that. It's going to make it a lot easier to make the tread. And it's also going to save on texture space, which is very important, because you saw how large those lines of tread were. It would have taken up a lot of space if you didn't put them all together. So it basically serves two purposes: saving space and making your texturing a lot easier. The same is going to be true for these faces here, the front, and actually what'll make it easier to line these up, because we're going to put these on top of each other just like we did with the tread. And to make our lives easier for lining it up, we're just going to press L, U, and we're going to unwrap this again, which is totally fine, and we're going to do the same to this one, L, U, unwrap, and that just makes sure that they're both exactly the same size, so that we don't have to worry about scaling like we did with this tire tread and stuff. Makes it a lot easier. So now all we want selected is our tires, so I'm going to middle mouse and drag, and we're going to get rid of this option to keep everything in sync. And we're just going to select this other tire by pressing L. Make sure you have both tires selected. Remember, it's mirrored, so we really have all of them selected at this point. We're going to press L over here. It doesn't matter which tire we get, but we want these lines going in the same direction, so it doesn't matter whether you make them straight up and down or how you do it, just make them both the same. And this is, let's see, what did we do? 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. Okay. Which would be, what, 30 degrees, I think. So we're going to press R and -30. Yep. And then press enter. So that's going to line them up perfectly. So again, if you don't understand, what I did was to figure out how much you want to rotate it, it's 360 degrees divided by the number of vertices that you have. So it's 360 divided by 12, which in this case is 30. And that will line these up perfectly so that we don't have to guess. It's already ready. It's good to go. So select both of them now with box select, S to scale, drag it down to shrink the size. And now we can turn back on this little option and actually position these. Scale it down, move it into position. Try to make it as big as possible without going past this border and without overlapping the other piece. So that's about as good as it's going to get as far as I can tell. And for the bottom, or the back sides, we're going to match them up as well. So we're going to do the same, press L, U, unwrap, go to the other one, select, L, U, unwrap. Turn off this option. Make sure both of them are selected. Just press L on the one that's not selected. And they already look like they're in position. And it's always possible that these are rotated, say 180 degrees. So if I selected this and did R180, you wouldn't be able to tell, but the UVs are actually completely upside down. It looks the same, but it's not. So it's always possible that they're wrong, even though it looks like they're correct. I'm going to press Control Z to undo it. And the only way to really tell is to get started with texturing. So we'll deal with it once we get to that point. So for now, B to box select, scale it down, and we're going to click on this option again. Scale it down some more. Remember, these are the ones that don't need a lot of detail. So you don't need to put it right here. You can always scale it down to basically nothingness and stick it anywhere really. It doesn't matter. Or you could put it here if you want. It's up to you. But I'm just going to put it here for now, I guess. For no apparent reason. You can always move it later. So don't be too concerned about where you put it. These treads will need a lot of texture space, so just select them. Make sure you have all of them selected by using box select, circle select, whatever you would like to do. It's probably big enough right now, so we don't need to scale it up any. We just need to find a spot to put it. And we can scale it down a little. I don't know if this is going to be any different than up here. Probably can put it here, and that will be fine. So I think that is basically it. We do need to still position, actually yes, we do need to position the license plate, which probably will go there a lot better than this will. So I'm going to move this over here, because I'm thinking I'm going to use that spot for the license plate, and we'll figure out this piece, the windshield wiper, somehow. We're running out of space, but we'll do it. So at this point I think we have, what haven't we done? So you can see this vertex down here. It may be like a pile of vertices, you can't really tell. But I'm going to go to vertex select mode and select this. Basically when you have a vertex here, what that means is you have something that you haven't unwrapped yet. Something that has been completely missed, that you totally forgot about. And in this case, it's this side vent, I guess, whatever it's called. What's it called? The side intake. That is what that is called. So I'm going to select this with L, Shift H to hide everything else, period to focus in on my selection, and we're just going to make a whole bunch of seams around here, because again this back part's probably not going to be seen, so we're just going to do mark seam, L to select this, U to unwrap. This part's going to be really small because nobody's going to see it, and if they do, they're probably looking at our model in too much detail. Do the same here, L to select it, U to unwrap, scale it down, bring it out of the way with G, Alt H to unhide everything. Now we have to position, and this can be carbon fiber, so again we want detail, which is going to be difficult to get on these edges because really these are pretty small. But we'll have to work with it, I guess. We could even, you know what we could do? Is just put these on top of each other. So I'm going to do S, Y, -1. That'll give me a similar shape. Even if it's not perfectly on top of each other, again, this is the one that's on the inside. You can see it's selected on the inside. It'll just basically share the texture from the one that's in the front. And even if it doesn't look perfect, most people are not going to look at the inside. I mean, it's really hard to even get the view to where you can see part of it. You'd have to basically hide the car intentionally to see in there, so we're not going to worry too much about it. We're going to leave it there because it is still important to have faces there in case someone does look, but we aren't going to go into too much detail. So we're just going to put it on top, and it will share a texture with this piece, just like we did with the tire tread, how the tread shares all of its texture. This will share a texture with the backside. So now we still have some vertices here. Surprisingly, I'm not sure what this goes to, so I'm going to just start selecting it. What does this go to? And this is our symbol, or the outer part of our symbol. So I'm going to go back to face select, press L, Shift H, hide everything else, and so we have some faces on the bottom we don't need. All these this bottom loop, so press Alt, right click, delete faces, and it shouldn't make any difference. See, if I go back to object mode, you can't even tell that we just got rid of those, so we don't need them. We're just going to make some seams right here and possibly right here. And I think that should do it. But as usual, I could be wrong, but I think that looks fine. Pretty good, I think. That's not going to need a lot of detail, so we can make it pretty small. This isn't the part that has carbon fiber, the carbon fiber look. It's only this logo, as far as I know. And maybe it's the other thing. I'm not exactly sure, because this picture isn't totally clear, but if you just make it just a solid color, I don't think anyone's going to notice. So it's this inner part's a solid color, and then the outer part's a solid color, which means we may want to separate them, but we'll deal with that if it becomes an issue. So I'm going to press Alt-H, unhide the rest of the car, select this, press L, and try to position it. And despite the fact that we're basically done with unwrapping, we have some space that we can use. So, and we do still have the license plate and the wiper, so we don't want to use too much space. We can probably put it maybe over there or on the opposite side, whichever one will give us the most space, which I think is probably here. And that's just in case we want to add more patterns or whatever, carbon fiber look or whatever it is. That may not be enough space to do something like that, but at least it gives us more than what we would have if we just stuck it somewhere else. So I think that's basically it for unwrapping. As you can see, we don't have any more vertices down at the bottom, which means everything for this object is unwrapped. But don't forget, if you have more than one object, like for example, if I press tab, we have the car, we have this wiper blade, we also have these logos that we haven't unwrapped yet. We can deal with that at a different point. I think for now we've done a good job, and I'm going to probably just save and we'll work on this after. But don't forget you have other pieces as well, like the license plate. So if you have more than one object, you're going to have to go through all of them, make sure you don't have any points down there, whatever, and make sure that you've completed your task. So since I'm happy with this, I'm actually probably going to give this a different name because I don't want to disturb like the original mesh. And actually, while I'm thinking of it, there's one more thing I wanted to add before we do anything. I'm going to select the car, press tab, and that is, although it's hard to see, there's like a red light at the bottom. We're just going to make something real simple for that by selecting these two faces here. Make sure you're in face select, select these two faces, period on your number pad. We're going to do Shift and D to duplicate, right click to cancel, and we're just going to Shift and H to hide everything else real quick. Select these two, press Q for edge slide. If you don't have edge slide set up, go to Mesh, Edges, edge slide, right click on it, add a shortcut. And I'm going to do the same here to shorten this a little, press Q. And go on here, press Q. Shrink this a little more. And press Control 1 for back view so we can position this a little better. There's actually the reference here we can use. Just try to match it to the reference, I guess. And that will be our very well made light. We can press Alt H, select this vertex, shift, or select linked, I mean, drag it forward some, scale it down a bit because it's probably, even though it's probably closer to the real thing, it's not really matching our model. Control 1 for back view, and you can start rotating it a little and moving it. If you want to snap it perfectly, you can press P and separate it, but actually this vertex needs to be moved first, I just noticed. So I'm going to scale it down Control 1 for back view, slide it up a little. And I'm going to reposition these because it's a little bit off. We'll just make it a little different than the real thing here. Go to select and linked, P to separate. This is just to make it snug up to the rest of the car. Tab out of edit mode, so you're in object mode. Select that piece, add modifier, shrink wrap, change the target to the cube like we did before, change it to project, enable negative direction, and even though it's not perfect, like it's kind of hiding behind this face here, it's good enough. So click apply, tab, well actually with this selected, hold shift, select the car, control J to join them, press tab, and now what we're going to do is select these faces, E to extrude, right click to cancel, drag it out some, and that's going to be our light, I guess, even though it doesn't look the best for whatever reason. And we can probably, with these two faces, control B, give it a little, well actually first, I just right click to cancel, deselect this edge, control B, and that'll be our light, I guess. It's not the best. If you want to take more time and make something better, it's up to you. Go to face select though, and we're going to have to delete these back faces now. Just make sure you have the ones in the back. Press delete, choose faces. As always, Z is wireframe, so that's how I got into that view and looked at it. But yeah, that's going to be, I guess, our faces here. And I may just try to move these a bit more because I'm not entirely happy with this. Just make sure you're in back view with control 1 and you can move it more to the corner, which is where I think it probably should be, is like, because it's really hidden on the back, so you want to try to make it hidden. Oh, that's why there's two vertices there. Okay, never mind. Alright, so that's probably good enough for that. I might want to move these down some. Or over like that, maybe. I think that looks pretty decent. Feel free to spend as much time on that as you want. So that makes the last detail. We will have to unwrap this, so I guess we might as well do it while I'm thinking about it. There's no like little things there, but we do have to unwrap this. So select linked, make sure you get it. Shift H. Pick a spot that you don't think people will look at too much to make your seams. We actually might just need to make seams on all these corners. Select it all. Once you're done, press unwrap. There you go. Scale it down, etc. Alt H to unhide everything. Select this, press L, and we're going to scale this down, keeping in mind that we still need to save space for the other pieces of the car. So just in case we want to add detail to the light, it's got a pretty good size. And now that we are done with that, and we have only the decals and the wiper blade and the other thing, license plate, we can go ahead and press File. But actually at this point, since we made quite a few changes, and some of them maybe you may not be totally sure of, like you might not like it or whatever, just to make sure we have a backup file, we can leave this as is and go to File, Save As. Instead of clicking Save, click on Save As, and we can change the name to like with UVs, or you can just do with UV, anything different than what we had to begin with. So this is with UVs, and click on Save as Blender File. So make sure the name is changed, Save as Blender File, and that just makes sure if you made any mistakes, if you want to go back, it's a lot easier than trying to go back and undo all that stuff. Even though it's not that difficult to undo seams, it's just good practice to save different files when you're not sure. So that should be it for this part. I'll work on the rest of the pieces and then we'll start texturing. So one quick fix here, I know we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but I did some practice texturing to make sure everything was going okay and the UVs weren't totally messed up. And fortunately, almost all of it's perfect, or not perfect, but it's good enough that it will pass. So there's one problem though, and it's actually this weird shaped quad right here that's going to give us a problem. I can show you how I determined that that's going to be a problem. And to do that, we can just go to Texture Paint real quick. It's going to tell us that we need to add a texture slot. That's why it's all pink. We don't have a texture slot yet. So we're going to add a paint slot. We're just going to choose a diffuse color. For most of my models, I'll leave it at 1024, but since this one's a lot higher quality, or at least there's a lot more details to it, and I would like it to look nice as possible, and just to avoid any problems down the road, I'm going to be using 4096, which is a very large texture size for a low poly model, but I think based on how much time I've put into this and all the other factors, I'd like it to look as nice as possible. So 4096 is what I'm going to use. Over here on the radius of the brush, I'm going to set it to 5 pixels. Just left click and you can enter in a value. This is the strength of the brush. I'm going to set this to 1. You can also left click and drag these if you would like to. That's another option. But I'm going to change the color to a blue color. You can choose any color you want. Now I'm going to click on this button, and what that will do is allow me to limit my selection. So for example, I can select this, and now I won't be able to paint anywhere else except for this spot. And as usual, you can hold shift and right click to add to the selection or to subtract from the selection. We'll cover this more in depth when we actually get to texturing. For now, I just want to show you how I found that this is going to be a problem. So if I press Shift and H, that will hide everything except our current selection. And now if we zoom in, and it's important that you zoom in and start to draw by holding the left mouse button, you can see that it's all jagged. And that usually means that you have a problem with your UV unwrap, and it also possibly means, like in this case, this vertex is very far down and it's causing this very strange angle between all these other vertices, and that's actually the main part of the problem, is this vertex's position. That's why we're getting a lot of this jagged edge. So I'm going to press Ctrl Z a couple times until all the blue lines are gone. We're going to go to edit mode. This is still selected. I'm going to go to vertex select, select this vertex, and I'm going to open up this panel. You can either click the plus sign or press N. Go to the top, and I want to change the Z position to 1. That should be a little higher up and hopefully a little better. We can close this panel now. Go back to texture paint. We still may have some problems, but select it, try drawing again, zoom in a little more, and we can really start to see that yes, we will still have problems. So the other part of the solution, first I'm going to press Ctrl Z to get rid of these lines here, is to do another unwrap. So let's go to edit mode and press U, unwrap, and we're just unwrapping this one face because it's the one that's giving us problems. And we're going to need the rest of the car to tell where to position this. So first let's get this out of the way by pressing G to grab, and then over here press Alt H to get the rest of the car. Let's select this, press L to get the whole thing. If that doesn't work, go to face select and select the face, S to scale it down, and drag it into position. Basically right back where it was. Although the shape is going to be a little different. It's not as stretched as it was before. That was part of the problem, is that the UVs were getting stretched and it's causing a problem. We'll see if this fixes it by going back to texture paint, Shift H to hide everything else. Zoom in again, and now that we've done that, the texture stretching has been removed, and you can see it's very nice and smooth down here at the bottom, which is exactly what we want throughout the entire model. So that's how you can tell if your unwrap is not very good, or if it needs to be changed. In this case, it needed to be changed. So I'm going to press Ctrl Z to get rid of all these lines, and I'm going to press Alt H to bring back the rest of the car. I'm going to click this button to get out of face selection. And basically what I did to come to that conclusion that that part was basically the only problem is I just started randomly painting around the model. You can zoom in if you want to add more detail, and seeing if there was any distortion, seeing if there was any jagged edges, if there was anything crazy happening. And the parts that you want to focus on mostly are the windows, so like the front window, the side window, the back window, etc. You want to make sure the wheels are good. you want to make sure any part that you're going to add a lot of detail, like the back, is going to be okay. And you can always use Control Z to get rid of these lines. Just keep pressing Control Z until they're gone. If you want to, you can turn on face selection to limit your selection. And if you look at the bottom, it's probably gonna, well, that's the wheel. We're just gonna Control Z that real quick. That was the wheel. But it's gonna be a little, usually it's gonna be a bit distorted. It's not bad because this is a huge texture, but, and that's fine because we're not adding detail down here. So this is kind of the fuzzy look that you'll get if your texture is not very, or if your unwrap is not really all that great. If you need to add more texture space for these parts of the car, you'll know that by it being fuzzy. But it's only like that because we made it very small. Like if we go to edit mode and we go to the bottom of the car, it's extremely small, and that's why we're getting that fuzzy look in texture paint mode. But in this case, we're okay with it because we're not adding detail down here. So I'm going to press Control Z, get rid of all these blue lines. Just keep going until they're gone. And then you can add more over on the wheel. See, this is nice and smooth. That's exactly what we want because we're going to be adding details here. And one thing I'll show you real quick is click this button, grab one of these treads, press Control 7 to go to bottom view, and we're going to paint on this, but watch what happens. We're just going to make sort of a straight line. I'll show you how to make perfectly straight lines later. But this is why we set the tread up the way we did. Because look now, look how easy it is to add tread lines when you set it up like this. And not only does it do it to the front, it's going to do it to the back in the exact same way. So now we have a very easy system for creating tread marks. Just like that. No problem. I'm going to Control Z to undo this. And you can feel free to experiment, have some fun with this, just paint around. And you don't even have to, I wouldn't even bother saving this. The only thing I would save is that first change that we made. Once you save that change, don't worry about the rest of this. You can just paint around, do some experimenting, you know, have some fun. You can even like paint on stuff like the mirrors or whatever and give yourself a little mirror. Whatever you'd like to do. As long as you don't save the texture, it's not going to be saved, so it's not going to be an issue. And you can just keep switching between face selection and normal selection. But that's just a quick overview of what we're going to be working on once we get all the unwrapping done. So another way to get rid of this texture, we can go back to object mode, go to the textures tab. That apparently doesn't show it. There we go. Okay, so I just had to select a different tab, go back to the textures tab, and now we can see it. So we can just select this diffuse and click the X, and then it will get rid of it. So once you're done playing around, we'll just get rid of that one for now, and we'll deal with it once we're done. So remember, go to object mode, refresh the list, select it, delete it. This one we can leave, don't delete this one. But that gets rid of that other problem that we had, and I can actually click this X, get rid of it over here as well. just to make it all nice and clean. So we're going to go ahead and save this now that we know our UVs are set up basically the way we want it. We still have a few more things to add, but we're just going to go to File and Save to make sure that our UVs are set up for the texturing.